We used to go up on the long weekends in May, and we'd watch the Sprung. Everybody'd sit around and enjoy a beer and other spirits and smoke and everything else, I guess, and watch a few guys perform and do wonderful things on skis at that time. Then down in the valley, they used to go to various places and play volleyball. So I don't know, I just had a crazy dream one night, and I said, it'd really be fun to have an event that we could all participate in. And I said, there's some top-notch skiers up there. You had your Dave Murrays and your Rob Boyds and your Nancy Greens and all that. And then a lot of people just like myself who, boy, to go ski with those guys would be really fantastic. Not that we're going to compete on the same level, but anyway, I talked to a couple of friends, and I was working at McAllister Spring in Vancouver at the time, and so they had an old Stentner machine, so I printed up a bunch of handbills saying Great Snow North Water Race, May 24th weekend or whatever, and 5 members on a team, of which one had to be a girl, and I think it was $10, and printed up a bunch of t-shirts, and that's how it started. The name, first off, came from the idea of having skiing, the cycling, people were just getting into cycling at that time, and the canoeing and the running, and they're all things. Well, kind of selfish. They're all things I like to do. Yeah, it was quite wild. I remember the first place team up there. I think it Nancy Green and Jim McConaughey, Trudy Alder, anyways, for sure was in it, and they won.
Now, I always did the skiing, and it's a long time ago, so I could ski as, keep up to the best of them. We were lucky we had Dave Murray on our team, and he was, of course, young and fit, so he did the cycling, and that was really good. And we always had good runners. Joe Chismazia one year, his wife Marianne, I think another year, and then Trudy Alder was great in the canoe, and there's different people that would join Trudy in the canoe.
In my race, the first one was Nancy and Dave Murray, who jumped in the river, and John, Heidi, and I were canoeing, and then there was Joe the runner.
And my wife and I, we participated about 3 or 4 of those races. One of them with Nancy Green, when Nancy Green was the skier, of course, and there was not enough snow in the lower part, and at that time, would you believe it, they allowed a 4-wheel drive the rest of it down to the valley, and Nancy Green was driving my 4-wheel drive, and we almost got killed.
But we skied down, and the snow didn't go all the way to the valley, so we knew we'd have to run the bottom half of the mountain. And so our team decided that it would be fair, as long as I drove, that Joe would drive up in his truck and meet me at the snow line, and I would drive the truck down and pass the ribbon to the cyclist. Well, everybody was figuring out what to do, and quite a few people decided to ride down the gondola. And we were skiing down, and we could hear them hanging out of the gondola saying, "This isn't fair, they stopped the gondola." And then anyway, I wound up driving down in Joe's truck, and Joe was saying, and well, what happened was I got to the bottom of the snow, and the truck wasn't there because the road wasn't there, it was somewhere else. And we had to run across the mountain to the road, which probably would have been easier to run down. But anyway, we drove down, and Joe was saying, go faster. And I could hardly reach the brakes on his truck. And every time I'd hit the brakes, the skis would come sliding through from the back of the pickup truck through the window and hit us on the head. And anyway, we made it.
And they skied down the first year down towards the mid station of the gondola. So some went down Jimmy's Joker, and at that time, Jimmy's Joker still had a lot of obstacles on it. I remember one year they actually, the gondola operators people were going to say, well, I'm not running now, I'm going to take the gondola. And somebody bribed the gondola operators to just sort of have it break down for a short while. All kinds of shenanigans. I thought, I guess the part that was the least impressive, but I'm a runner myself, was probably the running event. Cycling, you had your challenges. Probably the most difficult was definitely the ski. I mean, you ski down the mountain going lickety split, and if you get down in one piece and then you have to run down with your skis and everything else, I think that really took a lot of stamina and a lot of get up and go.
The Le Mans start was actually them standing in their ski boots. They had to run to their skis and click on their skis and then ski down, and you had to get to the bottom in your ski boots with your skis and poles. Some people had pack sacks on them, so they must have changed their shoes after they got out of their ski boots. But some people did definitely come to the bottom in ski boots. So it was mayhem.
But I think the person had to get to the handoff of the river with 2 skis and 2 boots. And you could decide whether you stopped and took your boots off and put your running shoes on, but you had to carry your boots and skis all the way down.
I entered the Great Earth Water Race about 8 times. I believe in 1978 was the first. I always did the ski leg, which was very physically challenging. At the start of the race, we would plant our skis in the snow and walk back about 100 feet. When it was time to start, all hell would break loose. Pushing, shoving, bodies flailing left and right. When the snow ended, we would let our skis ride over the grass and rocks, sparks flying. I devised many different ways of packing the gear down. The best method for me was handles screwed onto the skis. My boot shells would stay in the bindings. I would keep the inner boot on with running shoe soles duct taped to the bottom and start running. I remember skiing with legends like Dave Murray and Dag Abbey. I did beat Dag one day. I was in my 30s. He was probably in his 60s.
Somebody arrived at the bottom of the snow and there was a motorbike, a dirt bike there saying, "Hey, are you George?" "Yeah, hop on." So George, who wasn't George, hopped on, got a ride to the bottom and says, "Thanks, I'm Peter," or something, whatever name it was. So that was pretty funny.
Did paddle one year with Mike Jacobson, and he was very competitive and wanted to win. We had to go out and practice, and he put the team together. At that point it was getting pretty well known, and there was major crowds. Like, the reason that time I couldn't find my skier was because there were so many people waiting at the bottom for the skiers to come down and yelling and screaming and drinking and carousing, and everybody would surge up the hill, and so it got to be crazy.
All kinds. There was race canoes and guys that were racing. I think the local canoe renting there got a certain amount. Of course, it wasn't that developed then, and of course canoes were coming from all over the valley. All over the Fraser Valley. But everybody had to bring their own canoe and their own paddle.
The handovers, it was always exciting when the canoes came in, or when the bike came to the canoe, and there would be a whole bunch of people there, and people would be trying to find their canoes and running through the water and getting so it was exciting.
It's where the race, the skier came down, gave the ribbon to Dave Murray, who was the biker, and then he drove the truck towards my house on Nestus, where I was in a turmoil because he was late. Then we rush and picked up the canoe from Function Junction at Nello's house. Had to paddle the canoe to the bridge where Dave Murray had already waited. And then when he saw us coming, he dropped his bike, jumped into the creek. So while we were turning around, he was swimming out to our canoe, which we should have been at the shore. And of course, it's always scrambling because, you have even 2 canoes going in a turn. It's they have to know what they're doing, but I was never, I was always in the bow. I was never responsible for steering. There was always a real good canoers. And we were usually pretty much not leading, but in a group where people were pretty good. And I'm sure that somebody flipped. We never did. But I mean, with all these events and all these Passovers and different people and different whatever, everybody has a story to tell.
So there was actually a Japanese film crew filming it by helicopter. So as we went down the River of Golden Dreams, we had this helicopter hovering over top of us. And then we came out at Green Lake and handed off to the runner, and I guess the chopper, I don't know how it followed them through the woods, but it was a bit unnerving, and they were, you know, the wind was whipping all around us, and Mike was getting angry and trying to wave them off.
It was supposed to be a fun event. I tried to, you know, get the people. I mean, some people would protest every once in a while that, well, Fred pushed Jane off the trail or somebody sunk my boat or whatever, but I just kept saying, look, it's a fun event. You know, you're not going to gain great fame and everything else. I mean, the biggest fame they had is they might get published in the Whistler Question for the race results, and that was it.
And to me, I think one of the biggest memories is that nobody was going in it to win. They were all going in it to get a T-shirt. And I think everybody got a T-shirt. And it was real participation and lots of fun. And, you know, you'd put a group together, and the first few years were pretty amazing because there weren't really any rules. So I have some memories of that.
You know, it was a lot of community. I mean, like, everybody was very helpful. The mountain donated passes for the first place team. And I would spend almost 6 months trying to get things organized. I'd be going around, you know, if you had a little store and you were selling socks or something, I'd go up and say, give me a free pair of 5 socks, you know.
And plus it was the May weekend, so the whole of Vancouver was up to, that went on one day, and then people went to the rodeo. And so people were coming in droves from the city and in RVs and all kinds of stuff, because the road was always packed. Like, you couldn't get, once the skiers came down, if you tried to drive to the lake to see, there was no way. It was just packed. You could get there quicker, way quicker on a bike than you could in a car, and there was nowhere to park anyway.
I used to watch. It was fun to watch. I think everybody got as much fun watching as they did participating.
But I had lots of help. I had some great help with individuals. I had my own shop. I had some of them that participated, and my wife helped me out, and a lot of friends up at Whistler, and just a lot of Whistler people. I mean, you know, Chuck Blaylock, Karen, I mean, they'd put a boat on Green Lake, and Murray Coates would come out and he'd put a boat on, or, I mean, we had to go and get permits after a while from the Department of Highways because we were encroaching on the road. We also had to contact BC Rail so we didn't run into trains. And of course, we were in liaise with the RCMP. The RCMP helped quite a bit. We had a sort of an inner core group of about 5 people. And I think I treated them to supper one night, and we sat down and talked about where the race was going. But other than that, no, there was nope, all volunteer. And a lot of effort put in by, you know, quite a few individuals. It was not just a flash in the pan. And very thankful for, you know, a lot of good friends up there and a lot of good people in Whistler just, you know, jump in and help out. What we did is I had a bunch of team leaders. So each checkpoint would have a radio control person. They'd have a person checking bibs to make sure that the teams were not being disqualified or not showing up. And we'd have somebody relaying the information we'd have a person set up. Keith Fernandez used to run our computers and keep track of that end of it. When we got a little more sophisticated, we had the Army up there monitoring the communications, the 744 Communications Regiment, because we were having a lot of trouble with the communications. people didn't know how to use the radios. They're all neophytes when it came to radio talk. And I was figuring, well, one of the fellows suggested, and I thought that's a great idea because, you know, the armed forces are always looked at in kind of a bad light, especially after coming out of Vietnam era. And I thought it'd be a good chance that they set up around the kids were going through from this Myrtle Phillips school. They had a chance to see what these real Army guys do. And so there was a good interface between the community and the armed forces, and they set up where you know, the golf course is in Green Lake there. There's basically a landing strip and a field there, and they'd set up an Army camp there and for a week, I guess. They got all the top rations out of Chilliwack, and they thought it was a fantastic exercise. And of course, after a while, different Army groups across Canada were bidding on sending a representative who could go up to Whistler and enjoy all the shenanigans going on at Whistler.
And I think it was like you couldn't ride down the gondola and you couldn't have a motorcycle or a truck.
And I don't know how many races there were, but maybe there were at least 100 teams. And if all these 100 teams start with the skiing part, and it was free for all, you could ski where you wanted to, was a big crowd of skiers. So then a few years later, they introduced a cross-country loop up on top by the roundhouse. And that spread out the skiing part a little bit.
Well, they might have changed the starting spot of the biker handing off, because the biker had to go around the West Side Road and then hand off. And I think they changed the location of where the canoes started.
Going down the mountain, it was still a free-for-all. There was you basically had, there was a course down the mountain. It was just a, you know, you had a certain route to go, but it was not like a downhill or anything. All you had to do is you had to get down as quickly as possible, and you had to carry your stuff down to the base. And other than that, rules. Eventually, I think we started. I don't even know when we instituted putting helmets on people, but I know the bicycle racing, we started putting the helmets on people. The first year there were no helmets. I don't know how long that lasted. But trying to make sure it's a little safer. I mean, there's a lot of places, especially on the ski, it can be very dangerous.
Great memories. I'd do it all over again if I was that age. And yeah, these things, they're fun. And they really do provide lifelong memories. So appreciation for the guy who organized it, because, you know, he did it as Bryan Walhovd. He did it as a labor of love. And I mean, it wasn't expensive to enter. I don't even know if the entry fee covered the cost of the T-shirt. And I don't think there were sponsors and things like that in those days, but it was just, but it took an organization to run it. And I gathered eventually he handed it off to another group, and eventually it faded away, as these things do.
No, it just turned out to be a lot of fun. I think what killed it in the end, I just ran out of steam. When you have something like that, the first event, there was no holds barred. We didn't have insurance. We didn't have permission. I think I talked to Whistler Mountain and asked them if we could ski down the mountain, but I don't even know if we did that. We just sort of went Rambo on it. And towards the end, what happened was that I tried to pass it off. Nancy Green said, you know, you've got to try to get the municipality to step up and somebody to take over. And there is some interest, but I think it was taken over eventually by Grant Lamont for a couple of years. And then it just sort of fizzled. And then they brought it back in 2015, just as a remembrance.
No, one of the things that I think we could say, because of the Snow Earth Water Race and events like it around the country, is it's sort of the birth of organizations like the Spartan series and the Mudder, and these events that are so popular today. They're very similar. Yeah. And you challenge yourself, but it's all fun.